Good morning, everybody. This is Zach Said It Again. I'm your host, Zach Cooley, and I'm very honored and happy to have on the phone with me this morning Jim Clark. He is the author of, or co-author rather, of the new posthumously published autobiography of Mayberry's sweetheart and my dear friend, Betty Lynn. Jim, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Thanks, Doug. I'm glad to be here.
Well, as I said earlier, I'm very honored to speak with you. I have, as a Mayberry enthusiast and someone who spent his honeymoon in Mayberry 11 years ago, and I did my own book on Mayberry and Mayberry matrimony on my honeymoon in Mayberry years ago. I really admire the work that you do, going way back to the Rerun Watchers Club. Let me ask you before we get into Betty's book, is the Rerun Watchers Club still in effect? Do people still open up chapters everywhere, and is that something that's still doable, or is that kind of off the table now?
No, it's all still happening. We just had our newest chapter this past week, or this week. The Mayberry, we had one a couple weeks ago called the Mayberry Department of Water and Power, and this week we had one start up over in Illinois called She Married That Man Who Fell Down a Lot. That was our 1480th chapter.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I live in Whitfield, Virginia, which is about an hour across the state line from Mount Airy. Are there any chapters here, or?
There are some. I know there's been one up in Marion, and there's several, like places around, like a little further south from you there, like Blunteville, Bristol area, and around in there. But I don't remember if there's one particularly in Whitfield, but there's lots of them that have been started nearby. And of course, such chapters kind of come and go over the years. We've been doing this for over 40 years, so some chapters become inactive and then they start back up again, and we get new ones. So it's kind of a lot of ebb and flow there. But well, there's a lot of fans up in your area for sure.
If there's none started in Whitfield, perhaps I could do my own. I've been thinking about doing one called the Mayberry Choir. Do you have a Mayberry Choir?
I don't think there is one called this. Believe it or not, that was still available. I think last I checked, I think that would still be available.
All right. Well, hold that one for me, and I'll try to. I believe I can gather up enough people. More importantly, we are here to talk about your wonderful book, or should I say, the book of our dear friend Betty Lynn. Now, you have had this in the works for many years. In fact, I remember asking Betty on one of our many meetings. I said, Betty, you must write your memoirs. And she said, well, I've got it recorded. Jim Clark's got it. I don't know if he's going to put it out or not, but he's got it recorded. And I said, well, if he doesn't, if he doesn't want to do it, I'll try to get it from him and I'll do it, because I was so excited to see the book. And then how very apropos that it was published after she passed away. At first I was disappointed about that because I thought, well, I'll never get her signature on it, but because I'd like to have her, but in reflection, I think it was very apropos because we were able to get Betty's full life, because as the book says, she was working on it right up until the end.
That's right. She was making her final changes late September last year, early October. So she had a chance to get it. We tried to keep the book as much as possible to her words. So all the recordings we did, we just did minimal tweaking and fine-tuning of some things, just enough to make translated spoken words to written words, just making those kind of changes, but basically trying to keep her story as she told it, because we wanted it to be her story. So I think we've hopefully accomplished that. She I think knew everything that was going to be in there. So she didn't get to see the published version, but she got to see she was reviewing the final manuscript at the time of her death. So.
Well, I know that she would be pleased, you know, it was an emotional experience for me to read it because I and you know Betty had this way of everybody that she met. She made you feel like you were her best friend. So I feel like, oh, I'm reading this book that was of a dear friend of mine, and I have this wonderful distinction, but I really don't because everybody that she met, she treated that way. Would you agree with that?
I would. I think and it was sincere. She really cared about people and wanted to get to know them and know more about them. And she wasn't just there like an autograph line, just waiting for you to sign or her to sign and move on so she could sign the next one. She wanted to visit and talk to people and get to know them. And she proved that by years later somebody might come through her line again and she would remember them and
Yeah.
she would not only remember them but she remembered to ask about their kid by name and their family and that kind of thing. So she paid attention and cared and was very, very sincere about wanting to know people, and
Yeah.
that's just kind of generous person and kind person that she was.
And I had a privilege of knowing her and calling her a friend. I first met her in 2010, but she always remembered me. She remembered my wife by name. She read my book, and I brought her a copy of my book, and she read that, and of course bragged on it, and told me how good it was, whether she felt that way or not, and I felt on top of the world having such an accolade. You know, she was so well spoken. She always had a terrific story for you because I would always ask about other stars and did you meet so and so because I'm so in love with nostalgia from that period, and she knew everybody from that era. My favorite story is, of course, Lucy, when she asked Lucille Ball asked her, how do you get your hair that color? I wanted my hair color to be exactly the way yours is. And so, like, she's the most famous redhead probably in the world, but she wanted to get her hair color exactly like Betty Lynn had it. So Betty really was the most famous redhead in the world because hers was natural, and she had the envy of Lucy, who got all the credit for being the queen of the redheads, you know.
Yeah, Betty's hair stayed had a lot of red even at 95 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She still had a lot of naturally red hair.
Yeah, she said I never dyed it or anything. So that was my favorite story. And I loved the stories that she would tell about Betty Davis, and the fact that the book goes into great detail about her friendship with Betty Davis. One of the things that I didn't mention in the article that I wanted to get to was, have you sent a copy of the book to Jimmy Fallon?
We actually did, yes.
Good.
Sure did.
I hope you hear from him because that sounds like the kind of story that he would love. Do you want to just go over that story very briefly?
Well, Betty was hungry one night, late night after doing some shopping or whatever, and she wanted to get a bite to eat somewhere. She was trying to think of some place that might be open that would have a hamburger or something. So the taxi driver recommended the Polo Lounge, which was actually one of her favorite places anyway. So she hadn't thought of it, but that night he recommended it. She said that's the perfect place to go have a late night bite to eat. And she went to the Polo Lounge in there and got a hamburger. And the maitre d' set her down at a table, and there's this fellow nearby who was having a meal by himself as well. And there was a piano player in there playing just old tunes or whatever. And this stranger asked Betty did she recognize the song, and she told him, yes, I know what that song is, and told him. And they kind of struck up a conversation. And as he finished, before she did, he left, and she asked for her check when she was ready to leave, and said, no, that other fellow bought your meal for you, and she didn't realize he'd done that, and then but she didn't know who he was, and said, how do I thank him? And the waiter said, well, that was Jimmy Fallon, and she really didn't at the time recognize him or didn't know him, but of course this is around 2000, probably 5 or 6, somewhere in there when he was out in Los Angeles. So, he wasn't a familiar face to her at that time, but of course she later knew him very well from Saturday Night Live and everything else, and Tonight Show. Mm-hmm. And she was sad that she never got a chance to thank him for that meal. But so in the book she does. So we made a point of trying to get a book to him. I'm not sure if he got it or not, but we wanted to make sure he knew that in book form at least Betty had thanked him.
Well, I think I'm a big fan of Jimmy Fallon's, and he seems like a really wonderful guy. And I think, with the thank you note segments that he does, or used to do anyway, on his late night show, I think it would be the kind of thing that he would really appreciate if it got to him. Because I'm sure that he probably would know who Betty was by the Thelma Lou character, but maybe didn't know that was Betty Lynn either. So I think.
Yeah, he would know her. He would have known her from the Andy Griffith Show, but whether he would recognize her in 2005 or 6, right. I don't know.
Right.
But anyway, we just sent a book, and we sent a thank you note with it. So, we first tried to send it through the Tonight Show directly. They came back, so then we sent it through his agency. So we'll see if they followed through and gave it to him. I'm sure he gets many things in the mail from fans and things. So who knows how much gets to him? But we wanted him to know, or at least try to get one to him, so Betty could at least give him the thank you in the form of a book. So.
Well, I'm sure that I hope that he gets it, and I'd like to see her acknowledged some way on the show, and the book acknowledged on the show, because it really is a beautiful book, and it flows just like you were having a conversation with Betty. And I'm sure, as you said, that editing was not a very difficult thing to do because Betty was so well spoken.
She was a great storyteller, so it was just a matter of us turning the tape recorder and letting her go. And again, we made very few edits, and the publisher, after we turned in the manuscript, the publisher made 0 edits. I mean, absolutely not even changed the character or space or anything. We tried hard to keep it to Betty's words, and publisher respected that too, and didn't make any changes. So what you see in the book is only thing that Tim McAfee, my co-writer, and I did. We wrote the photo captions. We wrote all of those because those were done after Betty had passed away. But she knew which photos were going to be in the book, so the photos themselves are ones that she was familiar with and some of her favorites. But the photo captions and then the epilogue and our preface are the only things that Tim and I wrote. Everything else is we try to keep as much as possible to Betty's words.
Well, I've had the privilege of, writing the column for the Withville Enterprise as I have for the last 17 years. Some of the highlights of my career have been just these makeshift interviews that I've done with Betty by going up in line and carrying my little tape recorder and capturing a story here or there and, trying to store them in my memory bank. I've gotten lots of good articles out of things that Betty has told me, and, felt very privileged to be told these things and to read them again, like when she never got starstruck because she met with she knew all kinds of movie stars, but in her first movie with Robert Young, she was flustered by him, and she was supposed to flirt with him, and she told me that story, and she told me the story, which is not in the book, but she said to Betty Davis, Betty asked her, "What do you think about Gary Merrill?" And she said, "Well, I just voted for him for the Academy Award with the Screen Actors Guild. So I think he's a great actor." And she said, next thing I know, that was her next husband. So Betty was instrumental in that as well. She told me about meeting Nat King Cole and what a tremendous presence he had. When he walked in the room, he took up all the space in the room, while we're talking, we got to talk about the Andy Griffith Show, and there were some very interesting things that she mentioned. Betty is always so sweet and kind to everything and everyone, even people that it would seem impossible to be kind to. And she doesn't have anything bad to say about anyone, even directors who treated her bad. And it would astound me when she would say, "This director didn't like me," or "I could tell this guitar player that I was working with didn't like me very much." And I can't imagine anybody not liking Betty Lynn.
No, it is hard to imagine.
It is.
Such a nice person and kind and thoughtful and just had a lot of fun, entertaining. She had all the qualities you want in a friend.
Absolutely, and in just a human being. But with that point in mind, she was the first person I have ever heard say anything kind about Frances Bavier, because we all know Frances Bavier, as Aunt Bee, was a difficult person, period. A difficult actress, difficult to work with, difficult to speak with. But Betty said, she was a dear lady, and that's the only person, because I've spoken to many people from Mayberry days, and that is the only person that really painted a nice picture of Frances Bavier. And I thought only Betty could do something like that.
Yeah. I think she was known to be very Frances Bavier was very very professional, but she was could be a little touchy. But I think the other people on the show, I think Anita Corso got along with her well. Eleanor Donahue got along with her. They all kind of were careful what they said around her, and they knew that if you said a bad word around her or something, she might lash out to you and scold you for doing that or whatever. But they all respected her, and she was such a great actress, and they said they had to be on their best behavior around her, and not do anything that would irritate her. But I think there was a lot of respect for Frances Bavier. But I think Betty genuinely liked her, and they kind of looked out for each other, because a lot of times they were the only, especially before Anita Corso came on the set or on the show, they were pretty much the only women who were on the show, so as regular cast members for a long time. So
right, and she said that the women that her and Anita and Frances, they all kind of bonded together and looked out for each other. She kind of painted Frances as like maybe a mother hen,
right,
which is something I'd never heard before.
Yeah. Frances would every once in a while she'd bake cookies or whatever, bring those to the set or whatever, and around Christmas time she would get cookies to everybody. So she did a lot of thoughtful things like that. So she was maybe a little unpredictable. You never knew when she was going to be in a good mood or whatever.
Right.
But, I think there's a lot of nice things have been said about her, and I think again they all really truly respected what a great actress she was. She was, of course, the perfect person to play Aunt Bee. I can't imagine anybody else being an Aunt Bee.
And then what struck me as lovely was the bond between her and Ron Howard. She just absolutely adored Ron Howard, so much so that she felt she finagled an invitation to his wedding. And he says that, and she says that he looked at me like he probably didn't know who I was. But, I don't believe that, because when she went to Greensboro to see him when he spoke at the Coliseum for the Bryant Guilford series, I asked her, how was your meeting with Ron Howard, or what did he say to you? And he said, well, he told me he loved me. He always had, and I've always loved him too. I just adore him. But I think that he probably knew who Betty was and probably was delighted that she was there.
Yeah, they had Ron and Cheryl had a very small wedding, because it was a small church. There wasn't room for, so they had to have a pretty restricted invitation list for the wedding. And but Betty was, as she said in the book, she pretty much let everybody in town know that she was hoping that she would get an invitation. So finally, Ron's circle, let her know that she was welcome to come attend the wedding, and she did, and it was a highlight for her. It meant a lot to her to be there for Ron's wedding, so I'm glad that she got to do that. It's appropriate that Ron's father, Rance, married Barney and Thelma Lou and returned to Mayberry, so it was kind of,
yes.
Howard's got to return the favor there.
Yes, Tim Maccabee, your co-author. She has a very interesting story about Tim Maccabee in Pigeon Forge.
Yeah.
They got locked out on the balcony together.
Yeah, they had arranged for all the stars for Mayberry Region. They were doing a Pigeon Forge, and all the stars had their own cabin. Betty got in late night, her flight from L.A., and they went out on the porch so she could have a cigarette because she still smoked at that time. And the door locked behind him and his friend that was with him, and they got stuck on the balcony overnight, locked out onto the balcony, so they had to wait till daylight in order to see how they could. Tim could shimmy down one of the posts holding up the balcony and scamper back around to the front door and come in and let them back in. But they had 4 or 5 hours there on the balcony where they were having. But she said they had a great time just sitting there talking all night long, and that's all they could do anyway. They couldn't go anywhere. So
and how many people in the world get to say I spent the night out on the balcony with Thelma Lou? You know, how many men? Right. How many men in the world want to say that? You know.
Yeah. You know. Just him and his friend. That's about all.
When she met Gregory Peck, I really like that she mentioned the Barter Theater in Abingdon, where Gregory Peck acted, because that is the theater where I have been the reviewer off and on for the last dozen years, and I love Barter Theater and the people there. And I know they would be thrilled to know that Betty Lynn was talking about that.
And I love the Barter Theater too. My father and Bob Porterfield, who's the founder of Barter Theater, were good friends.
Oh, wonderful! Because you know Bob was born in Wythe County, right here.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You know what I didn't know about Betty was very traumatic years of her early life, where it was. It was her and her mother. They were a team from day one till the end. When her grandparents were alive, they lived with them. But, you know, she took care of everybody. And she had a deep faith in God. I admire Betty's faith. You know, I wish I had it to the extent that she had it and the things that she endured. But I just had no clue all that she had endured and what a truly remarkable lady she was.
Yeah, she was really, we were all lucky to have known her for sure.
And something else too, and I mentioned this in the article, and I would like your opinion on this. Betty was very innovative. Like, she was the one who suggested, instead of letting me play Andy or secretary on Matlock, let me be a housekeeper with an Irish accent. You know, that would have a more lasting role than just a secretary that says a line or two. But he wouldn't do it. Had he done that, which he ended up doing later, but not with her, she could have had a more lasting role. And the thing with suggesting to Merv Griffin, why don't you put a dance floor on top of the Beverly Hilton? And he hadn't done that. He said, you know, Betty, that's a good idea. And he did it and didn't even invite her to the premiere. I just think that she was shafted a lot, for lack of a better word, in her later career, and was smart enough and intuitive enough that she could have been among the biggest stars in the world if she had not been, as she said early in her career, naive, and I should have had a press agent, and I should have advocated for myself. And, you know, I think she was a genius, and I didn't realize how much of a genius she was until I read the book. But are you in somewhat agreement with me that she was kind of shafted in her later years in terms of her career?
Well, her career, you know, she of course had a tremendous tremendous career before she was Thelma Lou, which is what the vast majority of people know her just mainly just for Thelma Lou. But most of her career was Hollywood movies and later on live television in the 50s. But that was the bulk of her career. So a lot of people, you know, and I guess it's true for a lot of actresses as they get older, the roles become good roles become harder to find. And but she had ideas, like you say, she had ideas about which roles would be good and how to have better ones. And other people didn't always see what she saw, which is unfortunate. Like as you say, she could have had more opportunities, but she was also content. She was busy a lot of times during that era, taking care of her family, her mother, and without her grandparents, required lots of care. So that was foremost for her, was taking care of her family. So, but part of that would have been having more paydays too. So I'm sure she would have liked to work more in her later years. But fortunately, she had the Mayberry reunions and events where she could go and sign autographs, and that could be those personal appearances became a source of income as well. So Mayberry became a great benefit for her in her later years as far as being able to do these various events.
Well, and I'm thankful that, you know, it turned out the way that it did, because if it hadn't turned out the way that it did, we wouldn't have got her. You know, she wouldn't have been a part of Mayberry or come to Mount Airy maybe, and I wouldn't have been able to know her and call her a personal friend like the rest of the world, the rest of the Mayberry world, that is. But I still think that even when she was in the movie, she got small parts, and I think her talent was worthy of starring roles in many cases. And you know, like as I said, she could have been an enormous star. She had the talent, she had the brains, she had the beauty. She was very modest about talking about her looks, but I thought she was a knockout even till the end. And I always told her so, and I adored her. As everybody did.
She had many talents. She's a good singer, dancer, brilliant actress, and she as I say, a triple threat there as far as her talent. So
taught Marilyn Monroe how to soft shoe, which is another kind of mind blowing fact that I read in the book.
She of course, as she mentioned, she knew everybody in Hollywood. I mean, she was one of the most connected people with, you know, who's who of Hollywood. So she may not have had all the roles on screen that well did, but they were all friends. I mean, she knew she was part of the inside group of Hollywood.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and later she became a Mayberryite. She became one of us.
We're fortunate to have known these people, but it's tough when we lose them.
Yes, indeed. Mayberry has been a great blessing to my life over the last 12 years, and as you said, I'm grateful just to have known these people. Can you tell me how I can sign up for your e-bullet?
Well, it's free online. You go to imayberry.com, and there's a little heading up there where you can sign up for the e-bullet, and it's free. It comes out every other month. We have another newsletter called Weaver's Department Store newsletter that comes out alternate months to the e-bullet, but it's also free. It's just lots of whatever news and happenings that are happening in and around Mayberry. We try to keep folks informed of what's going on with the cast and crew and different new products that are coming out and that kind of thing.
All right. Well, go to Amazon and check out A Mayberry Matrimony and maybe get a plug for me in there if you think it's worthy of it.
I'll check that out.
But I'm sorry that we've not had a chance to meet in person, but as I said, I have followed your work for many years. I really appreciate all that you've done to and for Mayberry, and I hope we get to meet in person sometime.
Well, I'll keep an eye out for you. I'll be at Mayberry Days this year. I'm not sure if you will be, but anytime I'm in Mount Airy, I'll keep an eye out for you.
Well, true. And if you're ever in the Whitfield area, please let me know.
I'll do it, sure.
Whitfield loves Mayberry too.
Excellent. No, that's you're not that far from that area, that's for sure.
Not at all, not at all. So, well, thank you very much for talking with me and letting me take up your time.
My pleasure.
I very much enjoyed it, and blessings to you and your family, and hopefully we'll talk again sometime.
That sounds great. I enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yes, thank you for coming, and we'll talk again. All right. Bye-bye.